Hey everybody, welcome to episode 3 of Once Upon a Time in Addiction. I'm Mike, I'm an addict, and I'm your host. So in this episode, what I wanted to talk about was I wanted to do meetings. So meetings are a really important part of recovery for a lot of people. Meetings are a way for a lot of people of actually finding long-term recovery, both in Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous as well actually. But then again, meetings aren't for everybody. I'm not going to sit here and be an advertisement for NA, AA or GA. So that's not what this podcast is all about, and that's not what I want to do. All I can talk about is the experiences that I've had being a member of a fellowship. So for any addict or any alcoholic, you've been in treatment, let's say. Now personally, I was never in treatment, but I know a lot of people that were. So I can't speak from a place of having been in treatment. I can only speak about finding recovery through going into the rooms of NA personally. And again, this is not me advertising NA at all. I just can only discuss my own experiences. So a lot of addicts, alcoholics, find the recovery by first going into the rooms, maybe when they come out of treatment or something like that. Or a lot of people will find recovery by using just the meetings on their own. So for me, I had to do it alone, and I have been in and out of NA now for quite some time. I got a lot of recovery through it, but I also fell out of love with it quite a number of times, if I'm going to be honest with you. I suppose I went into my first NA meeting probably, I'd say about 21 years ago or something like that, maybe 20 years ago. And I loved it. I loved it from the get-go. I loved the identification that I was getting with the other members in the room, and I felt at home. I felt, you know what, these people get me, and I didn't feel alone anymore, because touching on this actually is quite important too, because this is what comes before recovery in a way. Most addicts will end up in the isolation stage. So the isolation stage comes towards the end of your active addiction. So that sort of is when you get to the point where you don't want to actually socialize with anyone. You would much rather be on your own, taking drugs, and you know what, or drinking, but it's actually the most miserable part of your addiction, of your active addiction, for me anyway. For me, it ended up with me locking myself in a room probably 4 or 5 nights a week, taking cocaine, and it was me shutting the outside world out completely, because I think my addiction wanted me to feel that way, wanted me to feel alone and isolated, worthless, shameful, full of guilt, and it achieved it at the time. I locked myself in the room. I took probably copious amounts of the drug, and I was absolutely miserable. I was listening to music absolutely off me bap completely, I was just lying there, you know, and at the same time inside, lonely as hell. You know, I could hear my family downstairs, you know, my parents or whatever, and there was a longing there for me to want to be with them and to want to do the normal things. It could be sitting watching TV, you know, it could be on a Saturday evening getting a text off somebody who wasn't actually in addiction asking me to do something. And I couldn't do it. I didn't want to do it. I just wanted to be left alone to take these drugs, but at the same time not wanting to be taking these drugs. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And then I always remember the come down. So whenever the drugs run out and you're on your own, that loneliness gets ramped up by a million, and you're just lying there and the suicidal thoughts start coming in. The reality of what you've done really starts to sink in. the reality of, oh my god, I'm not getting to sleep tonight, starts to sink in. And one of the worst parts of using drugs for me was hearing the birds sing at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, because you knew that you were no longer in the solitary night. People were starting to get up and move about and do their jobs and go here and go there, and the world was about to get very, very busy, and you were still off your nut while all this was happening. You knew that for me personally, I knew that my parents were going to be getting up out of bed, and they were going to start asking questions. They were going to be expecting me to get up at some point, and I hadn't even slept yet, and the paranoia was kicking in. I always remember when I was using, hearing people walking up and down the stairs in the middle of the night, and you were convinced that, looking out the window, convinced that, there was somebody outside in the garden, and that they were trying to get in the front door, the paranoia is insane. And you're just lying there with a million thoughts going around in your head, none of them good. And that sense of impending doom. And for me, I was, suppose as an addict, I was a functioning addict in a way. I was sort of 50-50. I wasn't functioning because you couldn't have got me to do anything for you, the next day, but I also had a job. To do, and a lot of the time I would have had to get up and go to work, even though I hadn't slept all night. So I was getting up, going to work and cutting hair all day, on a come down. When I look back at them come downs, what I realised now was that I was still as high as a kite, but the euphoria was gone, if that's what you'd call it, because I don't think there was much of euphoria to begin with. And I remember going to work and having to go to work and having to bloody make my way to work. I was getting a bus or whatever, and your skin crawling, absolutely crawling. People talking to you, you're replying to them, and it's like you're on autopilot. You don't even know what you're saying to them. It's like an outer body experience where you're looking at yourself while you're talking to these people, and it's weird, and it's also very hard to describe. And you're also full of shame. The paranoia is still there. You think people know. And then just trying to get through that day, not being able to eat anything, living on coffee all day, turning your stomach sour, And then the insanity of it was, if you weren't so exhausted, you would go back out again and do it again the next night, or else if your body was completely exhausted, you will go home and sleep. And sleep was an escape from addiction for one day. It was escape from active addiction for that day. But as soon as your body was recharged, you were up again and you're out looking for it, And the loneliness of active addiction, I cannot describe that, because I don't think I've ever felt loneliness quite like it outside of that scenario. And I've suffered from depression from a young age, and there's loneliness goes with depression, but not like this. Loneliness in addiction is because for a lot of addicts, you might be surrounded by a family with nobody else that actually uses. And for some people, yes, you might come from a family and there are other people in it that are using or whatever, but it's that feeling of being so different to everybody else. It's not as if you can turn around and say at the time, oh, I'm using drugs at the moment, oh god, it's, I just wanted to talk to somebody. You wouldn't just sit down there and we'll have a chat. You're not going to do that. And that's where the isolation comes in. You're locking yourself away, because you don't want to get found out, and you think, I think for the first couple of years I thought that I was so smart, I was such a good liar. But towards the end, like that, whenever I was sort of, isolating myself and all that, the crack started to show. I wasn't able to hide it anymore. I was getting sloppy. I was getting messy. I was leaving stuff. You could see stuff on my nose. I couldn't even hide it anymore. I kept disappearing out to the toilet every 5 minutes. You think I had a bladder problem, but obviously it was out in the toilet. Taking more, and I think it's almost like subconsciously you want it to end anyway, but subconsciously you're nearly trying to get caught, or you're waiting on somebody else to just call you out on it, so you can move on and start to maybe do something different. And that happened to me. I got caught. I got called out on it. I got an ultimatum, and I remember that. And that ultimatum for me. Now listen, when I talk about this, when I talk about my experiences, I go back and forward to different periods because I had so many relapses. I had rock bottoms where I got good recovery, and then I went back out there again, as we call it. And then I had to reach another rock bottom, or there was another reason why I managed to get back off the drugs again. So for me, when I did finally go to my first ever NA meeting, that is why I felt like I'm not alone anymore. That loneliness in 1 hour disappeared from me. And the spirituality, which I didn't know much about, I'm not a religious person. I still wouldn't consider myself to be very religious, to be honest with you. I'd probably be more of a spiritual kind of person. For me personally, I believe in a God. I know a lot of other people don't, and that's cool as well. And in recovery, you talk about your higher power, and your higher power, if you're religious, will be God or whatever. If you're not religious, your higher power could be the feckin' chair in the corner. You're sort of handing all your worries over to that, and you walk away from it, and that's it. The chair has them. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's just another way of thinking about it. So when you're sitting in that room and you have these other people around you, and the first thing they do when you got there, the first thing they did was give you a hug. That is, to receive a hug when you are coming away, or you're about 12 hours clean at that point, and to just receive a hug without any judgment is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. You go into the room, you sit down, you listen to somebody else's story, maybe you start to hear a couple of bits and pieces about how it all works, and you know that you're there for a reason. You know that you've earned your seat in there straight away. The numbers you get from people, the support you get from people. The next day you get a text message telling you, or asking you, do you want to come to a meeting? I'll take you, or I'll meet you there. It's incredible. And for me, at the very beginning, I got recovery straight away. So I managed to get a bit of good long-term recovery. And I think it was based on that initial meeting. It was based on the people in that room. They did the right thing. They seen me as a new guy who was in the room, who needed their help, and they focused their help to me. And the impact that had on me was incredible. I think it was probably about 6 months in. I was driving home from work, and big things had started to change for me. So I had done I was going to work every day, getting some solid work done, getting a routine going, starting to eat again, starting to put weight on, starting to find other things to do, starting to become a more reliable person. And I remember driving home from work that day, and I just looked around, and all of a sudden everything looked different. I could smell the grass in the fields. I could, the sky looked bluer. could hear birds singing with the window down. It was incredible. And when you go to meetings and stuff, sometimes people talk about having a life beyond your wildest dreams. And for me, I was starting to see that life beyond my wildest dreams. I was starting to see it appearing. It had been a long, long time since I had seen the colour of the sky or heard the birds singing. And I think I touched on that maybe in the last episode, and I'll always remember that moment. And for me then, I thought, okay, I've got this. I have this, I know what to do now, I know what I need to do. But in fact, I didn't know. I thought I did. I ended up relapsing about a month later because I stopped going to meetings at that time. Now again, I'm not preaching saying if you stop going to meetings you'll relapse. This is just what happened to me. And I ended up back out there, and it was horrific. It was absolutely horrific from the get-go. When I went and I got the drugs I wanted, somebody had given me a quote in a meeting one time, and they said, if you ever go back out there, you'll have a belly full of drugs and a head full of recovery, or NA, or whatever you want to call it. And that's exactly what happened to me the first night. So I was sitting there, I was using, but in my head, all I could think of was what I had just given up. All I could think of was, this is your responsibility now. You can't blame anyone else on this. You know you have a problem, you know you're an addict, and you've still chosen to go and do this. And the guilt was amplified even more so, and it took me quite a while to get back into those rooms again. All the good stuff that was happening in the meantime, before I relapsed, that was gone. I was back to square one. The weight started falling off me again. My life had become so unmanageable at that point. I started missing work again, all that sort of stuff. And I did try. I dipped in and out of the rooms again for a while. In and out. Got a week here, got a week there clean, but then relapsed again. The person that I was buying my drugs off at the time, I was such a good customer to him when I had that relapse. I used to get free stuff. There's a bit more for you. You're my best customer. At that point, I developed a €400 a week cocaine habit. It was so unsustainable, it was frightening. I ended up getting myself into serious debt as well. I ended up owing a very bad person a lot of money. I was getting threats that my house will be burned down, all this sort of stuff if I didn't pay back the money. My life was absolutely out of control. What I did was, I made a move, I made a change, and that's what they call when you go and do something geographical within addiction and recovery and NA or AA. Sometimes you run away from your problem and you think this is going to fix it. For me, to an extent, it fixed it. I got away for a while and I didn't use. I moved away and I didn't use. It was a new place, a new chance, new people. But at that time, there was a thing going on around the place that there was a lot of debate over. And it's what they called head shops back then. So that's where you could go and you could get your synthetic cocaine. You could get your synthetic weed or whatever the hell it was. And it was mental. In these shops you could buy like a mirror and a metal card and a metal straw for actually chopping up your gear and snorting it. And you could openly buy it. And because it was available, it was a bit like a pub, I suppose. It was a bit like a pub for addicts. Or an off license, I should say, for addicts. And I found myself going into one of these. My addiction told me that this was okay. Because it was legal now, I didn't have to feel guilty anymore. You know, everybody's doing this. Anybody can do this. So in the end, then I ended up massively addicted to that stuff. And my addiction just went up another notch. You know, I'd moved away. I was away from my family. I was in a new place trying to build a life for myself. And I ended up even worse off. And to make it worse, I was really hurting the one I loved then, because I was with her and she didn't deserve it. I was lying, scheming, manipulating, spending massive amounts of money on this stuff. Massive. And I hit a rock bottom. And this was my rock bottom before I got some serious recovery. And that was me attending some counselling at the time. I went to a group therapy and I started going to meetings in my area here. And again, going to those meetings, I met some fantastic people. Got numbers, all that sort of stuff, and got some real recovery. In that period of recovery, I got 7 years. So 7 years, we'll call it, maybe, of really, really good recovery. I didn't learn my lessons. I stopped going to meetings again. And what I did, when I decided that the meetings weren't for me, I decided I was going to find another way to stay clean. And I found God. So at the time, I was all into my spirituality, Buddha, Hinduism, you name it. I meditated every single day of the week. Sometimes I meditated twice a day. And you know what? It kept me clean. And also, I didn't think of drugs. You know, I was so into this other thing, and I actually think I was addicted to it. I was addicted to meditation. I was addicted to spirituality. Was I living clean though? You know, was I still going around acting like an addict? I probably was in a way. I was probably still quite manipulative and stuff like that. But it did work for me. So this is me trying to balance. There's meetings, but there's also other avenues people can explore and do explore, and they get recovery from that too. So I'm never going to judge anybody because I've lived that experience myself, and I did manage to find some recovery without meetings. I don't particularly recommend it at all. I really don't. I think the support you get with meetings is absolutely phenomenal. But it's all about finding the right meeting for you. It's about finding the right group for you. If you feel that the group you go to in your local area is not for you, you have other options. There are meetings everywhere. There's also online meetings. You can go to them online. You can log in on Zoom. And in every single town, there's a meeting somewhere. Sometimes you will have to drive, but is that not worth it for the recovery? I think it is. So for me, I've had a love-hate relationship with meetings. You know, I went ahead and I found that bit of spirituality that kept me clean for a long time, until it didn't. I've always found myself having to go back to meetings in the end. You know, when I do, I take breaks from them. In those periods when I've had a break from meetings and I'm not going to them, they do generally tend to lead to some sort of relapse for me. So I think it's probably not a good idea for me to avoid them for too long. I've been out there, I've tried it without them, and personally for me it doesn't work. And as I've said at the beginning of this episode, is that, you know, I'm not trying to tell anybody else to go to a meeting. All I can say is they have worked for me, and they've worked for millions of people around the world. In every single meeting, there's egos. You'll get that. So the one thing I hear from a lot of people that have tried a meeting for the first time and never went back to them, when I talk to people, is they always say, I didn't like it. There was a lot of people seem to be talking a lot of waffle. They talk about, you know, big personalities in the room and all that sort of stuff. And it can be absolutely daunting when you're sitting there, especially when you're around people that have had recovery, years of recovery. Some people have 20 years of recovery. They're passionate about it, you know, they're loud about it, they're excited about it. And that can be overwhelming, I suppose, for somebody who's literally just 12 hours clean or whatever it might be. But if you sit long enough in one of those meetings and you listen and speak if you feel you need to speak, I can nearly guarantee you will identify with somebody. You will find somebody in that room that tells your story, and you will literally be sitting there thinking, are they in my head? How do they know this? How is this possible that this person is singing off the same hymn sheet that I am? And get a number off somebody when you're leaving, hang around at the end of it. You know, if somebody makes eye contact with you and walks towards you, let them. Don't run. It's all very friendly, you know. It's all very caring and it's all very healing. But you will meet people that you don't like. I've met a lot of people I don't like in meetings. You know, I'm going to be honest. I've met people that I don't like in meetings that stop me from going back to them. And that has been my biggest problem. That is why I stopped going to meetings, because I get the idea into my head I don't like a particular person, or I don't like the way that meeting is being run, or that meeting's going, because there's politics in meetings as well. You'll hear a lot of politics. There's a lot of people take them very seriously, and they love the service side of stuff. You know, they love getting involved and keeping the meetings going. And you know, sometimes you can look at that and think there's a structure here, there's a hierarchy here, and it can feel like there's a hierarchy. And at that point then, you can think, you know what, I didn't come here to be told what to do, or blah, blah, blah. But the one thing you have to remember is that you go to a meeting for you and nobody else. So let people talk, let people argue, let people say what they want. Ultimately, you're there for an hour, you're there for your own recovery, and you're there to get what you need from it. And to top that, I guess, what overrules all of that is the other people that you meet in meetings, the friends you'll make for life, the people that will pick up the phone to you at 4 o'clock in the morning just to make sure that you're okay, the people that will message you every single morning just to say good morning. Doesn't matter if you message them back or not, they'll still message you every morning because they care about you and they care about your well-being. Those are the kinds of people I've met, and those are the kinds of people that I know I will remain friends with for the rest of my life. There's never been any judgment from any of these people when I've relapsed. When I come back, there's a cup of tea and there's a hug, you know. And that for me is what keeps me coming back. I might take a sabbatical. I might be away for a while. But in the end, I always come back because I do know that that's where recovery lies for me. So, to sum it all up, weighing up the pros and the cons of going to meetings, going down the spiritual path. You know, some people throw themselves into the gym, you know, and that will be their saving grace. That will be where they go and they find their recovery. You know, in a way, the gym is like an addiction too, you know, but it's probably a healthier one, I would imagine, than using. So, but a lot of people find a lot of different ways of staying clean. So whatever it is you're doing out there, if it's keeping you clean, keep doing it. Well done. Give yourself a pat on the back. For those of you out there that have 1 day clean, well done. Fair play to you. Give yourself a pat on the back. I always love that saying that the cleanest person today is the one that got up the earliest in the morning. Doesn't matter how much clean time you have behind you. Whoever gets up earliest in the morning have the most clean time that day. And that is all you have, is today. Tomorrow's not promised to you, and yesterday's gone. What you do next is all that matters in recovery. So go into the next room, if you're listening to this, to the people that have supported you, to your family. Go and sit with them. Watch an episode of something you've no interest in watching, but sit with them and be with them. Because ultimately, you may have lived through a time whenever you were in a different room with the door locked. And if you remember back, maybe all you wanted to do was to be sitting there with a cup of tea in your hand and to be present in front of your family and to be with them. Because to me now, that is the most precious thing that I have, is the ability to sit and be there for my kids and to sit with my wife, to have a conversation, to not be jumping when my phone goes or looking out the window, to just get to be there and be with her. I'll never forget those times in that bedroom, wanting to die, thinking everybody thought I was a failure, full of shame, full of guilt, full of remorse. I don't have to feel like that today. So that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm really looking forward to the next one. Not sure yet what I'm going to do with it, but I'll have a little think about that one. But please don't forget to hit me a share, hit me a follow, hit me a like, leave me a review. Get in touch. Let me know. If you have a story you would like me to tell, send it to me. That's what this is all about. Hoping to have our first guest on very soon. I need to upgrade the equipment here, so I'm just gonna have to get myself a few bits and pieces to make sure that these interviews go quite smoothly. At the moment, I don't think my one microphone is gonna quite cut it, so leave that one with me, but I am hoping to have somebody very soon on as a guest that will share their experiences as well. That's it, folks. Catch you on the next episode. Thanks for tuning into this one today, and remember, you're not a bad person, you're just an addict. Help is out there. Go and get it. Chat soon.